My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 38 years old, and I'm a Senior DevOps Engineer. I remember the exact moment I sent that email, the one that would unravel everything. It was 2:03 a.m., the blue light of my monitor reflecting in the dark glass of my office window. My fingers hovered over the send button, a strange mix of dread and fierce satisfaction tightening my chest. The subject line was stark: immediate resignation, Eleanor Vance. I knew what it meant. I held the master token, the unique, cryptographically secured deployment key for the entire production and demo environment of our flagship product, Nexus. Without it, nothing moved. No new code, no configuration changes, no critical patches, no rollbacks. And tomorrow morning, at 9 a.m. sharp, our new VP, Mark Harrison, was scheduled to present Nexus to the Series C investors. He'd been boasting for weeks about the seamless new features he'd pushed through, features I'd warned him were unstable. I pressed send. A cold calm settled over me. Mark thought he could sideline me, dismiss my warnings, and still expect my systems to perform. He was about to learn the hard way that the infrastructure he took for granted was held together by more than just code. It was held by me. To understand why I took such a drastic step, you need to know the history, not just of Nexus, but of my role at Kronos Tech. I'd been there for 9 years, starting as a junior engineer and growing with the company, building the very systems that made Nexus possible. I wasn't just an employee, I was the institutional memory, the person who knew every knot and splice in the digital cables. My desk, with its familiar clutter and my chipped ceramic coffee mug, a gift from my first mentor, etched with the company's old, simpler logo, was a fixture in the engineering bullpen. That mug was a symbol of my permanence, my foundational presence. Then, 6 months ago, Mark Harrison arrived as our new VP of Engineering. He was all buzzwords and aggressive timelines, with a polished LinkedIn profile and a reputation for disruptive innovation. His first week, he called an all-hands meeting, beaming, and declared that Kronos Tech was stuck in the past. He looked directly at me when he said it, even though I was the one who had just completed a major migration to a cloud-native architecture. My direct manager, Ben Carter, a decent but spineless director, just nodded along, avoiding my eye. The first major incident came a month later. Mark insisted on deploying a massive UI overhaul directly to the staging environment without going through the usual 3-phase testing protocol. I flagged it in our daily stand-up, explaining the potential for cascade failures. Eleanor, Mark said, leaning back in his chair, a dismissive smile on his face, we're not building a rocket ship here. It's a web app. Let's move fast and break things, right? He winked at the younger engineers. Ben just mumbled something about trusting Mark's vision. I kept my face neutral, but my stomach clenched. I knew breaking things meant I would be the one fixing them at 3 a.m. I was right. The deployment introduced a critical bug that took down the entire staging environment for 18 hours. Mark, of course, blamed legacy code dependencies and lack of documentation, not his rushed process. What I didn't understand yet was that this wasn't just about technical disagreements. It was personal. Mark started systematically excluding me from key architecture discussions. My team members, whom I'd mentored for years, were suddenly pulled into special projects directly under Mark's purview, working on features I hadn't approved or even been informed about. He'd schedule meetings at the last minute, knowing I had standing commitments, then claim I was unresponsive. My recurring motif, that chipped mug, started to feel less like a symbol of permanence and more like an anchor, holding me in a role that was slowly being stripped of its authority. The pressure escalated 2 weeks before the investor demo. Mark announced a new, feature acceleration initiative that required a complete overhaul of the Nexus data ingestion pipeline. He presented a plan that completely bypassed my carefully designed, fault-tolerant queuing system, opting for a direct-to-database write method. It's faster, cleaner, he proclaimed, ignoring my detailed explanation of why it was a single point of failure. Eleanor, your processes are simply too bureaucratic for our agile future. He said it in front of the entire engineering team, making me feel like an impediment, an outdated relic. Ben, my manager, was silent, staring at the floor. That detail mattered later. I recognized then that Mark wasn't just trying to improve things, he was actively trying to diminish my value, isolate me, and eventually, push me out. He wanted control of my systems without having to deal with my expertise or my inconvenient warnings. He wanted the glory of the new without the responsibility of stability. The master token, which I had personally generated and secured on a hardware key, was my last line of defense. It was the only thing standing between his reckless ambition and catastrophic system failure. It was designed to prevent unauthorized or unvetted deployments, and I was the only one with the full, multi-factor access to initiate a deployment or rotate the key. My preparation was quiet and methodical. I spent my evenings reviewing every piece of documentation I'd ever written, ensuring that all critical non-proprietary knowledge was accessible to my team. I updated my resume, discreetly reached out to a few former colleagues, and moved all my personal files off company servers. I also spent hours in our internal knowledge base, meticulously detailing the architectural integrity of Nexus, specifically highlighting the critical role of the master token in deployments and system stability. I even included a note about the complex, multi-day process required to generate a new master token, should the current one be compromised or lost. This wasn't to sabotage, but to protect myself and to ensure that my warnings were on record. I also made sure my final pay stub and benefits information were downloaded. The last straw came the day before the investor demo. Mark called me into his office, Ben sitting stiffly beside him. "Eleanor," Mark began, a saccharine smile on his face, "we're making some final tweaks to the demo environment tonight. I'm going to need you to hand over the master token to Ben. He'll oversee the final deployment." My blood ran cold. "Mark, you know the protocol," I said, my voice steady. "The master token is stored on a secure hardware key. I'm the only one with access. A proper handover requires a formal security audit, a new key generation, and at least 48 hours. It's not something you just hand over." Mark waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. This is an urgent business need. We need to move fast. Ben will be responsible. Just give him the key and the password." Ben still wouldn't look at me. "I can't do that, Mark. It's a massive security risk. And frankly, it's against company policy." Mark's smile vanished. "Eleanor, I'm giving you a direct order. If you can't comply, then maybe this isn't the right place for you anymore." He stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "We'll expect the token by 5 p.m. today. Otherwise, we'll have to consider your employment." I walked out of that office, my mind racing. He wasn't just sidelining me, he was trying to force me into a security violation, then fire me when I refused, or blame me when things inevitably went wrong. But he miscalculated. He thought the master token was just a password, something easily extracted. He didn't understand that it was tied to me, to my physical key, to my unique biometric authentication. Generating a new one wasn't a quick IT ticket, it was a high-security, multi-departmental process. That night, after dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I thought about all the late nights, the weekends I'd spent building Kronos tech. I thought about that chipped mug, a constant on my desk, a symbol of my dedication. And then I thought about Mark's smug face, Ben's averted eyes. I knew what I had to do. I sat down at my personal laptop, not the company one. I drafted the email carefully, ensuring it was concise and professional, but unambiguous. It was addressed to Ben, Mark, and HR, effective immediately. It read, "I am tendering my resignation from Kronos Tech. My last day of employment is today, current date." Then, the critical paragraph, "As the Senior DevOps Engineer, I have been the sole custodian of the master token, which is essential for all deployments and critical system configurations for the Nexus platform. Due to the immediate nature of my departure and the lack of a formal, secure handover process, I will not be able to provide the master token. I have previously documented the comprehensive procedure for generating a new master token, which involves multiple security steps and takes a minimum of 48 hours to complete. I trust this documentation will assist the team in establishing new protocols." I reviewed it one last time. It was 2:03 a.m. The city outside was quiet. I clicked send. The digital deed was done. My phone started ringing at 6:45 a.m. It was Ben. I let it go to voicemail. Then Mark called, then HR. I ignored them all. I made myself a cup of tea, a rare indulgence, and watched the sunrise. I knew the demo was at 9 a.m. I imagined the frantic scramble in the office, the realization dawning on Mark that he couldn't deploy his final tweaks, or even restart the demo environment if it glitched. He had bypassed my systems, overridden my warnings, and now he was facing the consequences. At 9:30 a.m., my former colleague, Sarah, texted me. OMG, Eleanor. The demo. It's a total disaster. Mark tried to push a last-minute patch and the whole environment crashed. They can't get it back up. He's yelling at everyone. I felt a pang of something, not triumph, but a quiet vindication. The demo wasn't just delayed, it was destroyed. The investors, I later learned, walked out after 20 minutes of Mark fumbling with a frozen screen, blaming unforeseen technical issues. Over the next few days, the calls continued, more urgent, more desperate. Mark even left a voicemail, his voice tight with barely suppressed rage, demanding the token. I replied to none of them. I knew they couldn't force me. I had resigned legally, and the company's own security protocols, which Mark had dismissed, were now protecting me. Generating a new master token was a complex process, involving multiple security layers and a fresh audit, taking days. The investor demo was dead. A week later, I received an offer from a competitor, a company known for its stable engineering culture. It paid more, and the interview process had focused heavily on my experience with system architecture and security. I accepted. I never went back to the Kronos tech office. A courier picked up my personal belongings, including my beloved, chipped ceramic coffee mug. It sits on my new desk now, in a sunlit home office, a quiet reminder of what I built, what I protected, and what I eventually had to walk away from. The mug is still chipped, but now it feels like a badge of honor, not a burden.